The Vorthane Dominion had catalogued 11,000 starfaring species in its 4,000-year history. Every single one of them built warships the same way. Symmetrical, elegant, efficient, predictable. Then they found humanity. Fleet Admiral Draxis Kell stood on the observation deck of the Dominion flagship Absolute Certainty, staring at a tactical hologram that refused to make sense. Around him, his officers murmured in the clipped, nervous tones of people who had just watched their entire understanding of warfare collapse. "Run it again," Kell said. Lieutenant Vessa Thorne didn't look up from her console. "Admiral, I've run it 11 times. The reading doesn't change." The image floating above the tactical table showed a human vessel, registry designation USS Kentucky Thunder, drifting at the edge of the Aldebaran Reach. By every metric the Dominion understood, the ship was a disaster. Its hull plating was uneven, patched together from 3 different alloy grades. Weapon emplacements jutted out at angles that violated a dozen principles of aerodynamic and thermal efficiency. There was no discernible symmetry, no elegance. It looked, Kell thought, like something assembled by a committee that had never spoken to each other and didn't particularly care. And it had just annihilated the Dominion's 9th border fleet in 6 minutes. "Play the engagement footage," Kell ordered. The hologram shifted. 12 Dominion cruisers, arranged in the Dominion's signature perfect lattice formation. A defensive geometry refined over 3,000 years of warfare, closed on the single human ship. It was not a fair fight. It was not supposed to be a fair fight. The Kentucky Thunder opened fire first, and nothing about its weapons behaved the way Dominion sensors predicted. Its main cannon didn't fire a clean particle beam. It fired something closer to a storm, a chaotic barrage that should have wasted 90% of its energy on interference patterns. Instead, the human gunners had somehow tuned the weapon to exploit the interference, turning what should have been a design flaw into a spread pattern that punched through 3 Dominion shield arrays simultaneously. "That's not possible," whispered Commander Ewan Park, the Dominion's chief weapons analyst, forgetting for a moment that she wasn't human and had no business having a human-sounding name. An old joke among the crew, from the days when the Dominion still thought understanding humanity would be easy. "Their weapon geometry violates the Eschenvale coherence principle." "Apparently the humans didn't get that memo," Kell muttered. The footage continued. 2 Dominion cruisers tried to flank the Kentucky Thunder, a maneuver that had never failed against any known species. The human ship didn't retreat, didn't reposition according to any known defensive doctrine. Instead, it rotated, exposing what Dominion scans had labeled, dismissively, as redundant armor plating. The plating wasn't redundant. It was reactive, layered explosive charges sandwiched between hull segments, designed to detonate outward at the exact moment enemy fire made contact, turning the ship's own armor into a weapon. Both flanking cruisers were gone in under 9 seconds. "They armored their ship with bombs," Kell said, and he wasn't sure if the emotion rising in his chest was horror or something uncomfortably close to admiration. 3,000 light-years away, in a shipyard bay that smelled like ozone, burnt coffee, and machine oil, Chief Engineer Dana Whitfield was arguing with a junior technician about rivets. "I don't care what the manual says," Whitfield said, wiping grease off her hands with a rag that had stopped being useful for that purpose 2 grease stains ago. "The manual was written by people who never had a Dominion boarding party try to breach hull section 7 during a live engagement. We reinforce it ugly, and we move on." The technician, a 24-year-old named Robert Alvarez, gestured at the half-finished warship looming above them in the dry dock. "Chief, this thing looks like it was built by throwing 3 different ships into a blender." "That's because it was kid," Whitfield grinned. "You know what the Dominion's problem is? They think a warship is supposed to look finished, like it rolled off an assembly line into a museum. We don't build ships to look pretty. We build ships to keep fighting after the pretty part's already blown off." She rapped her knuckles against the hull, where a mismatched plate of salvage titanium had been welded. Not bolted, welded by hand, by a crew chief who'd learned the trade from his grandfather, over a section that had taken damage in a training exercise 3 months earlier. "Every scar on this ship," Whitfield said, "is a lesson we already learned, so the crew doesn't have to learn it again the hard way. The Dominion builds ships from blueprints. We build ships from funerals. Alvarez didn't have a response to that. Neither did anyone else on the deck. Back aboard the Absolute Certainty, Admiral Kell had reached a conclusion he did not want to reach. They're not designing warships, he said slowly. They're designing survivors. Thorne frowned. Explain, Admiral. Every species we've ever fought designs for the battle they expect to win. Clean lines, symmetrical power distribution, textbook doctrine, because textbook doctrine assumes the fight goes according to plan. Kell pointed at the ruined hulk of the Kentucky Thunder hollow image, still drifting victorious amid the wreckage of the Ninth Fleet. The humans design for the fight going wrong. Every asymmetry, every ugly patch job, every violated principle. It's not incompetence. It's institutional memory. They've been fighting each other and apparently fighting us long enough to know that a battle plan survives first contact for approximately 4 seconds, and after that what matters isn't elegance. It's whether the ship, and the crew inside it, can still function while falling apart. The bridge went quiet. Admiral, Thorne said carefully, the Ninth Fleet was our most advanced formation. If a single human cruiser did that, then we are no longer fighting a war of fleets, Kell said. We are fighting a war of engineers who have already imagined our worst day and built for it. He turned from the hologram, and for the first time in his 4-decade career, Fleet Admiral Draxis Kell felt something the Dominion's official doctrine had no word for. It wasn't fear exactly. It was the cold, clear recognition of an opponent who did not need to be perfect, only stubborn. Pull back the border fleets, Kell ordered. Recall the 12th and 20th. And send a full report to High Command. What should it say, sir? Kell looked one last time at the jagged, ugly, impossible silhouette of the Kentucky Thunder, still holding position over the wreckage of a fleet that outnumbered it 12-1. Tell them the humans don't build warships to look strong, he said quietly. They build them to refuse to die. And there is no doctrine in our 4,000-year history that has an answer for that. Somewhere in the Aldebaran Reach, the Kentucky Thunder limped toward the nearest shipyard, half its hull scorched black, 3 decks flooded, 1 engine running on backup power, and every single crew member aboard alive, already trading stories about the fight, already planning the next ugly, brilliant patch job that would make her stronger than she'd ever been before.